Today's program is brought to you by Korin, a supplier of Japanese chef knives and restaurant supplies. For more information, visit korin.com.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guests are Stephanie Mercier-Voyer, Zev Rovin, and David McMillan. We'll talk to these guys about wine, food, their new book, and more. We'll taste a wine that Zev pulled from his stash. That is one of the producers from the book for our weekly wine sip. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Rarely do I sit down with three guests at one time for the podcast. This is actually a first. I just want you guys to know. Today we were talking with Stephanie Mercier-Voyer, a Montreal-based writer and author, but now living in New York, and the GM of the much heralded Four Horsemen. In the past, she has edited magazines. She's also a freelancer. We'll talk to her if she still does a little of that. And pretty much the driving force behind Spilled. Zev Rovin is not just a wine importer, but an OG in the natural wine world. He put all his chips on one bet almost 2 decades ago and founded Zev Rovin Selections with a curated, diverse portfolio of the best winemakers in the world. David McMillan is a former chef, restaurateur. You may know him from Joe Beef in Montreal and his cookbooks. He is now a farmer at his Hayfield Farms in Quebec, a viticulturist, winemaker, and now a fellow podcaster. Along with their friend photographer, Xavier Terra, they have just published Spilled, Natural Winemaker Stories and Recipes, a fusion of a wine book, cookbook, and reference book that more importantly tells the stories of not just the wine, but the people and culture that make it. Welcome back to the Grape Nation, Zev. Welcome back to the Grape Nation, David. Stephanie, welcome to the Grape Nation. We're talking to everyone in Brooklyn, New York, at the offices of Zev Rovin's cellar, at his offices, which is filled with bottles. We're sequestered to this windowless room with incredible wines, sitting around a makeshift table and on boxes, which to me is very cool and typical. All right. Before we get into the book, Spilled, I want to ask you guys a few things, and we'll go around the horn, because when I get a great interest like this, we're not just going to talk about the books. So the first thing I'm curious about, and I know the book has occupied a lot of your time, tell me what you're doing now or moving forward. Start with you, Steph.
Doing now, post-book?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm just promoting the book. We're doing a bunch of events in the coming months. Outside of the book, I just became GM of the Four Horsemen.
So that's, you're settling in on that.
Yeah, I'm kind of settling in. I've been there for almost 4 years now, and we're about to open a new restaurant across the street.
Italian?
Italian, Cavallini, hopefully opening in June, July. And I've kind of been tasked with, being the keeper of the Four Horsemen and making sure that everyone feels taken care of and that it remains a little jewel box of a restaurant that it's always been.
One thing everyone at Four Horsemen does, regardless of what your position is when it comes to wine, they all jump in on it. They'll talk about it. They'll bring in and all that. So I'm not going to ask you this question. I'm going to ask David. Does she know enough about wine to carry that torch?
Oh, absolutely. Steph's well-versed, great taster, a quick study. I think, fell in love with natural wine very quickly a few years ago. And it's actually never even come to my...
So that's a ringing endorsement.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Thank
happy
you,
to
Dave.
hear that. All right, David, we'll come to you in a second. Zev, what's going on with you? Post book, just trugging along.
I guess, yeah, sure. I mean, we have the wholesale company here and in other places, and we're just trying to kind of keep the train on the tracks, I guess we'd say.
So
we've got obviously like
let's
lots of
talk
critical
about
stuff.
potentially keeping the train on the tracks. Let's talk about Trump tariffs. What's your exposure? What's going to happen if things kind of stick and stay for a while? How does that affect business?
I think the difficulty is trying to predict anything because
Right,
Trump's
which
obviously very
basically
unpredictable.
everyone's answer.
So every day is just like a new, fun adventure. But yeah, right now we just pay tons of money every day toward a tariff that we didn't used to pay. And it might be that it's way more in a few months, and it might be that it's less.
So you're
in a few
currently
months, and there's
paying a
no way
tariff
to plan whatsoever.
that didn't exist.
Yes, right now we're
The-
paying.
the-
Right now we're paying 10%
Right.
on the value of everything we import.
Can 10% F everything up?
I mean, if you're a person where money matters to you and you like to drink wine, sure. I mean, like,
And you have small margins.
and of course, it's like not just wine. Wine is just like this little thing, but it's 10% on every single thing that you buy that's imported from anywhere, unless it's from China, and then it's way more or something. So, yeah, I do think it's going to have an effect on people's, income.
So you don't
savings
sound
and stuff.
happy, but you don't sound freaked unless you're good at concealing it.
From our company's perspective, at 10%, I think we're like, he threatened 200%. We had a meeting
Right.
with my entire company that said, if that happens, I'm sorry, we all have to find a new job. I'm, moving to Thailand and retiring and everything. And so, if we're not there, let's say, we avoided that fate.
Right.
So instead, I didn't fire everyone that works.
Why Thailand?
Seems like a nice place.
Okay.
Now,
Beautiful
what
weather.
about one last thing before I jump over to David? What about consumption? I mean, I've been doing this for years and years, and everyone I'm talking to, we've seen a lot of changes. There's been sort of this generational change where there's younger drinkers, more health conscious, maybe don't drink at all, or gravitate towards mixology. Is that an issue, or is natural wine even a little more bulletproof to that? Then
I think that natural wine is small enough that it's not really subject to like the broad waves of what goes on in the larger market. So, we have like enough small people in the community that are into natural wine and that like to drink it, that if, people are doing like Ozempic and yoga and they're quitting drinking, like they're maybe quitting some other kind of drinking than they were this one. And the people that are into like this small farming movement of, small producers and creating natural wine still feel inspired by that and like to do that. I don't think that like we haven't seen the type of drop off that I think when you look at like the graph of wine consumption,
Right.
which is obviously like way down overall.
that's good news. Like David, I'm intrigued because you and I did a podcast years ago. You were just kind of pulling back then, and that was, I think, during COVID. And a lot has happened since then. I mean, I think you kind of packed it in, moved on to a farm in Saint Armand,
Correct.
on the southernmost part of Quebec by Vermont. I'm just curious. I know you're probably doing good things, but tell me what's going on.
Not much is going on. We just do our daily work. I felt like I was unhappy in the restaurant business, pre-COVID, hung on during COVID, and
But
had
that drove you crazy too, the way the
Yeah, it's
city
terrible.
of Montreal and
Oh,
all
yeah.
that handled it. I remember.
No, it wasn't great, and I think I was actually affected quite severely by that because I'd been hustling dining rooms for years, maybe talking to 120 people a day, and I think I had a separation right before that as well. So next thing you know, I was like living in a 1-bedroom apartment above the restaurant, and it was illegal in Quebec to go outside after 8 p.m. So it was something else. So when the smoke cleared, I could definitely get back onto the farm. I'd already, planted a vineyard there. That it takes a few years, or 3 years to get vines off the ground. And the path was clear for me that I didn't want to set foot inside the municipality of Montreal as a job. I'm saying, like, I'll go in for a play or something, but my happy place was exploring the second part of my career was chef. And then I believe that farmer for me, since the day I started cooking,
I was going
was
to
a
ask
logical
you imagine that early on.
one of the reasons I went into kitchens is because I was fascinated by agriculture, by carrots, by how asparagus are made, by garlic, by all these things, and I was lucky to, at the beginning of my cooking career, end up in, the middle of Burgundy. And then I had an epiphany in Burgundy. It was basically, wine is as important as food. If I'm going to choose a career in the restaurant business, that I had to know everything about cooking delicious food, but it was, my obligation as well to know everything about wine. And so, my career, I monopolized not only the kitchen, but I also kind of, ran wine lists wherever I worked. It was very important to me that there was a flow in the food that I was cooking, some kind of natural farm food with an organic base and, an intelligent approach towards fish and seafood, but that the wines would follow. I've worked in restaurants where the sommelier was off on his own thing. And I was like, none of the wines, none of that on your wine list go with any of the food that I make. So, it was important to me quickly that there was a cohesion in that. Anyway, so to make a long story short, that lands me on the farm, right? Basically eating the food that I grow, promoting my neighbors,
Right.
And,
Through your
practicing
social media
and
exposure.
practicing viticulture.
But was
as
it always
a- it's-
viticulture always part of the farming thing, like you would do growing?
I was always fascinated by it, right? And
So tell me, there were no vines on the property. Did you plant vines?
I planted everything from scratch. We planted 2 acres in hybrids, mixed white hybrids, newer hybrids, lower acid hybrids. And then we planted definitely 3 hectares in vinifera with a lot of interesting test viniferas. Like, I have
So
a couple of
you're-
rows of Ehrenfelser, a couple of rows of Optima, and some
You're
weird
still
things.
in the stage of will the vinifera do well in that
Oh,
climate?
it does
So-
well.
It does?
Oh, it
Okay.
does wonderfully. There's amazing vinifera wines in Quebec. Pervenche is celebrating their 30th year of growing Chardonnay in Quebec. Those wines are stellar. He breaks sugars of 13%
Wow.
sometimes, so we're seeing definitely great pluses in Quebec viticulture happening. And some guys are getting really good at making hybrid wines. I tasted Zev last year, a couple of, Marquettes from Pigeon Hill. And I said, imagine if we had sommeliers in New York City with their eyes closed, and Zev closed his eyes and thought for 1 minute. And it was like, he goes, I think the sommeliers would all say this is Chianti. It's cool stuff, right?
Have you bottled anything yet? Are you? What
I've
stage are you at?
I've sold all my grapes to my neighbors.
Okay.
So we've bottled stuff under
Is
Hayfield
that
Farms.
because they're young to you? Or?
A little bit of
Okay.
that, and also I had a baby happen. Like 2 years ago. So the baby was born basically during harvest. So I said, we're not going to make wine this year. I'm just going to sell all of this, and but this year we'll be making everything. We just built a new shed. We built a big crush pad.
Oh, nice.
We're getting all outfitted. So this is the year, and I'm happy that the first vintage of Hayfield Farms will be when the vines are 5 years old and sturdy, and
Are they going to be called Hayfield Farm?
it'll be called Hayfield Farm. I think so. Yeah.
Okay. I think you mentioned this, but some of the hybrids are hybrids of what? The grapes?
Hybrid grape varieties.
Yeah,
Well, this
right.
wine actually has hybrid grape varieties in it. So we grow Itasca, Prairie Star, Swenson White, Louis Swenson, another grape called Adelmina, some Roland.
I'm going to look at Zev. Have you ever heard of any of those?
I have, but I really only do wine things for everything.
Yeah, really.
I see the vision of that though as a big field blend of all the hybrids.
Yeah, New York State's doing a good job.
They are. So is Vermont.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, Deirdre, they're staying in their lane and working with the grapes that are there. All right, that's what everyone's doing. Let's jump into the book, Spilled: Natural Winemaker Stories and Recipes. I always have to get the vitals out of the way, and Stephanie, you could steer this ship a little. I probably should have asked you earlier, but how did you guys meet? I know you guys have had a relationship years ago. How did Zev come into the picture? So, Stephanie, you and David met when and where?
I feel like I can't really pinpoint when we met exactly, being in the Montreal restaurant scene. I've known Dave for a really long time. I interviewed Dave for Vice years ago
wow, yeah.
for like the 10-year anniversary of Joe Beef, which is probably 10 years ago now.
For Vice,
for like Munchies
not
for their
David's
food.
Habits.
No.
Oh, okay, I wasn't sure. Either
We
one
did
would
talk
be a
a
good
bit about
interview, right?
David's vices. But yeah, it was for the 10-year anniversary of Joe Beef. And it was with Xavier, actually, who photographed Spilled. So that's kind of when we became more acquainted, but we became really good friends, I think in 2018 or end of 2017, which is when we started talking about this book. Dave had just moved in above Joe Beef, and there was a coffee shop below where I would go every morning, and Dave and I would just grab coffee every morning and kind of chat about wine, restaurants.
So 2018 is the conception or the seeds planted of the book?
Yeah, for sure. I
And
think
this-
Steph as
this
well.
starts with you two. And Xavier maybe because you've traveled with Xavier.
Steph had questions on
David.
like what's the process? Like Meredith Erickson, who'd written the first two Joe Beef
Mhm.
books with us. I think in conversation, Steph was like, "How does that work? Like, how does that structure work?" And I'd been through it twice, so I was like, "Well, I have an agent, and then this is how we write a treatment." And she was like, "How do you write a treatment?" I said, "Well, we basically write the first 2% of the book. We write the last 5 pages and the first 5 pages, and the chapters fictionally, and we submit that. Basically, we try to make like a nice worm on the hook. The agent sends that out to publishers, and we see if we get any bites. And Steph, said okay. So she went on her own and kind of did. I think, is this your third book?
This is my second book, but I wanted to write cookbooks. I've been working as like a food writer and travel writer for the Air Canada magazine for some time, and for Vice and other publications. And I really wanted to make a cookbook, and the way the Joe Beef cookbooks kind of changed the landscape of cookbooks, at least in Canada, but kind of, throughout of that format, I really liked it. So Dave and I started talking.
I forgot. That was a good head start.
Yeah.
With David's, publishing already. Where does Zev come in? Where do you have a relationship with Zev at Joe Beef?
Yeah, for sure.
But isn't the story that you used to go to Montreal because
Mhm.
it was far ahead of New York as far as natural wines?
To start your company.
Yeah. In the early days of the company, I couldn't necessarily afford to like go to Paris and do research on wine, and so I would drive up to Montreal and I would eat in all the restaurants and I would drink all the wines I could. I'd find the ones I liked, and then I would call them and then go to France and visit them, because it was just the importers in Montreal had already been doing like the on the ground work in Europe way before. There were some very good ones doing work here in New York, but there was just more at the time in Montreal, so I could do import research there through the importers.
Was there anybody established or on their way up in New York, looking for natural winemakers, smaller producers?
I mean, Jenny and Francois was already
already
there. They opened in 2003, I think. Louis
Okay.
Dresner had been around
Right.
long before, which, so they'd been around forever. Savio Suarez had opened a couple years just before. Of course, Kermit Lynch imported,
Right.
LaPierre in 94
But a lot
or
of
whatever.
winemakers
that was
had
pretty
no
much it.
representation, you found out, right?
I mean, there was a lot of wine available. There was a lot of things that were not imported at the time.
Imported.
And so, I think I got lucky in the sense that like there was, still a lot to discover. Whereas if you start now, like there's, you turn a rock over and there's a wine importer there, and everything is, everybody knows about everything before the wine's made. You know,
Right.
2 years before, some guy's like thinking about renting vines in Alsace, and like there's like 4 importers from Oregon there. So it's like, it's a different landscape now than it used to be.
What about talking to the winemakers? Did it take much convincing, or they were happy that somebody from the States had some enthusiasm about bringing wine?
I mean, I think that the relationship with the winemaker is not like the type of thing where you're like you don't like go to the store and like, pick it up.
Right.
When you engage with a winemaker as a wine importer, you're trying to create like a year in, year out trust and business relationship where, they know that next year you're going to buy the wine, the year after that, and 10 years after that you're there to buy the wine. So were they excited to like, I didn't really approach it like, hey, like, let's go. It's
Right.
more like, I think that there's a market for this in the US, and, I think we can, if we try, we can sell it, and you try to build a relationship. And I think maybe if that spins back to the concept of the book a little bit, all that work happens walking around a vineyard with somebody and sitting at their kitchen table and standing in the kitchen with them while they're preparing, lunch or whatever, and just talking about shit and life and
That's kind of a
and
description of the
finds
book.
and everything. And that's a little bit like, the topic of the book is being in these moments, hanging out with people in their houses, having the food that they cook in their kitchen, not in a professional way, not in a, fancy way, but in the way that they, often cook for 10
Right.
people, let's say, or
It's
like,
kind of natural, not to.
And I mean,
Another
that was those relationships was a big reason why we wanted Zev to be part of this book. When Dave and I had the idea, and we put together the pitch and kind of sold the book. And then after a while, we're like, okay, we can't be just two, a chef and a writer writing about wine. We need a wine person to kind of give it cred, but also
Open the doors.
open the doors to those winemakers. And Zev had spent so many years building really strong relationships with people, and the spill doesn't exist without those relationships
Right.
that
That's-
Zev has built, because you can't just, sleep at a winemaker's house and have them make you feel like your family
Well,
if you haven't.
we're going
had
to
a-
talk about
yeah.
that. Just a couple more things on the vitals. So 2018 discussion. When do you go hardcore and start writing it? Does COVID affect any
Oh
of
yeah,
this?
we sold it
time.
before COVID.
Oh,
Yeah,
you did.
yeah,
So COVID was
in-
a big cock
In
block right there.
2018, Xavier and I went on the first trip. We went to Friuli, and we met with Dario Princic. We met with other winemakers over there to kind of build the pitch and take photos. And then we sold it, I think, a year later after we had built the pitch. And right when
why
we were,
Friuli? I mean,
just because I was going on a press trip to Slovenia for work,
God.
and hired Zav to come with me to take photos of the press trip. And we're like, okay, let's extend the trip back a couple of days, cross the border, go to Friuli. It makes sense.
So you talk about the book 2018. You kind of travel to
Mhm.
spec it out. How long does it take to write?
So long. COVID really affected it.
Because of COVID? What if it was a normal circumstance? A couple of years?
I think it would have come out 2 years
Okay.
earlier if it wasn't for COVID.
Doesn't matter.
Because
Just
we weren't
curious.
able to travel. We sold it at the end of 2019. Then in 2020, we were
Ah.
planning on traveling that year. Everything shut down. So we had to wait until early 2022. And even that got delayed because of Omicron. So yeah, everything kind of took a
boy.
while.
So between the three of you, did you visit every winemaker that's in the book?
They did. They traveled with Xavier
Mhm.
to do the photography. I knew that
Did you visit anybody?
I visited my own on my own time, the
Right.
year before that, but no, not on the trips. I knew my job was to, how can I say, they were going to basically harvest all the recipes, get all the photography, get base recipes down. And then my job was basically at the end trying to, fix the recipes, because
Right.
a lot of the recipes were quite.
We'll get into
Yeah.
specifics on that.
But
in
you
a
also
second.
had a baby at the
Yeah.
time that we
Had a baby in
were
a
doing the
vineyard.
trips.
And I said, I don't need
that
to be
baby
there.
is like
Yeah.
your supreme excuse for everything. All right, so to me, this is not your typical wine book.
Mhm.
It's not your typical food book. It's certainly not your typical wine and food book. Um, who wants to jump in, and because of that setup, how would you then describe the book?
I mean, it really is a hybrid between a wine book and a cookbook in a way.
Okay.
I feel the reason
More
why,
than a wine book with recipes?
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, because
There's no pictures of really, stainless steel tanks and wine cellars like you always see in books,
Yeah.
and terroir and
Well,
a beautiful vineyard over a hill.
well,
These are true human stories around food.
Well, address this,
Mhm.
because somebody said this was not a serious wine book.
oh, I said that.
But I don't think you mean it was unserious. It's just the way you approached it.
Mhm.
The way I look at it is, it's pretty serious. I mean, everything you do, the recipes, and you gave us a little snapshot. Zev, who better in this than wine? Stephanie, your writer. Everything about it is pretty serious, but in your own way. And by the way, the information part, like when you talk about natural wine and all that, it's very succinct, but it's super informative. You cover a lot
Mhm.
in a small period. Like, people who don't know that much about it, they don't need to read Aaron Isko's book about natural wine. They'll get the gist, from this book, which is a compliment.
I think that was the idea, because I feel like a lot of wine books are very, they feel like textbooks a lot of the times.
Right.
And it feels very unapproachable and intimidating to a lot of people to learn about wine. So we wanted to have a book that feels more like a kind of a lifestyle book that you can approach if you're just interested in food, if you want to find out a little bit about wine, or if you're just interested in reading stories. So it's not, that's the not serious. It means it's not like an academic
Right.
kind of book,
Which
but it's
I
not a
appreciate.
stupid book.
And the word stories is
Yeah.
really the foundation of this.
Mhm.
I don't get a chance to have guys like you again to sit down, so I want to ask you, are we, and Zev, you take this one first, are we beyond defining what natural wine is and, its acceptance and all that? Can we just say it's a bunch of thoughtful artists and producers, and wines, like many others don't have great stories behind them? Are we?
No. You can't just say it's a bunch of thoughtful artists and producers. That doesn't mean anything at all.
Okay.
That has no specifics or meanings or has no structure to it whatsoever. I think we still, I hear where you're coming from in the sense that, like, it was this long battle of like natural wine, conventional wine, or whatever. And like, have we now like melded to like a safe space where we're all friends? And like, sure, we're all cool. But like, natural wine very specifically is farmed without chemicals, is made without,
But-
significant additives. And you can be an artisan and use lots of chemicals. That's totally fine within the
When
scope
I
of
said
artisanship.
thoughtful, I could
And
have
thoughtful.
extended that sentence. I would have said organic to biodynamic to regenerative. That's
Had you said that, I would have been on board.
okay.
But
All right.
I don't mean that
But-
by offense, but
No,
I
no,
just
no,
mean like
I'm
the
glad
conventional
you
wine
said-
world for long has said like, oh, well, we sell, artisan, thoughtful wineries too. And we're like, yeah, okay, but
That's like
we're not
putting-
saying you don't. We're just saying that they use chemicals and put stuff in the wine, and we don't.
That's like
That's it.
putting natural on any food in a supermarket. It's bullshit.
Sure. It's just, it's not that them being artisan is not beautiful and special, and that those farmers and those people are not wonderful people that also make nice food for their friends when they come over. Like, they totally do. But it is worth still, I think, the distinction of natural wine being made without
So-
chemicals.
Does everyone agree with that?
Yeah, and I think in our bubble of people who work in wine or work in food, it feels a little tired sometimes to describe what natural wine is because we all know it. But at the Four Horsemen, even though a lot of people come in for the natural wine program and are really well versed in the world of natural wine, a lot of people are not, and we still have to like explain what it is and what makes it special and what makes it different.
So that's an ongoing thing,
Mhm.
which I think is fine, and you and I do agree. But I want to ask you guys this, because in a good way, you jumped on and said, "Listen, thoughtful isn't it? These are people that practice this, and this. It's in the farming, and we could do a whole show on
But even
that."
to add a thing, when I've noticed a lot in my travels and natural winemakers, it's not even a thing about wine at the end of the day. it's not even, it's that's just the dinner beverage, right? It's about
The
waking.
culture.
Yeah, but it's about farming. It's about agriculture. It's about the bread that you have for breakfast, the cheese that you put on it, where you got the butter, the maybe the attention to the vegetables or the soup you're going to have for lunch, maybe even to the car that you drive and a decision that you make about the clothes that you wear. Just a generally a little bit awoke on our relationship with nature and trying to make intelligent decisions, not for yourself but also for your
Right.
family and humanity.
As specific
Then
as the soil.
having a beverage made from grapes, an alcoholic fermentation of beverage made from grapes with dinner that has, no adjuncts to it is just part of that, right?
I totally agree. And
It's the
Zev,
opiate to the movement.
right. Zev, here's one thing that I kind of wrestle with because, like I said for the second time, I agree with your response to my question. One of the things I wrestle with, and a lot of people, we talk about it on the podcast, that great wine is made in the vineyard, and what's done in the vineyard is what makes great wine, and we know what that is. Here's what I don't get. There seems to be less discussion, and I don't know if regulation's the right word, about what people do in the cellar. Even practitioners of people, that are conscious of what they do in the field. Is that an issue? Is they don't go hand in hand when you're dealing with the right people? Or?
I mean, I don't want to be like contrarian to everything, but I mean,
Please do.
I mean, the idea of great wine in the vineyard is sort of like it's sort of cute, but I guess that assumes that like all things went well in the fermentation, and in conventional winemaking, you can sort of make all things go well with a whole set of additives that have been developed, by scientists and enologists and large universities over many years to make that go really smooth. I think the like aesthetic idea of the natural wine fermentation, natural wine production is stepping back to a period before that and letting it, and guiding wine to its end with the yeasts that are native, that are, in the air and on the grapes, which are more plentiful when you farm organically. Now, that's sort of a harder process and a less predictable process. And not to go too far, but there's all sorts of criticism about natural wine being bad. And a lot of it is, and because it's not,
Like any category.
it's not so consistent, right? Like and we're relearning. When I say we, not me, I'm not a winemaker, but those who make wine are relearning how to make wine the way we did for 8,000 years before we brought so much modernism to it and technology to it. And so there's a lot to rediscover. And I think since, Lapierre and Jacques Nieuport in the beginning, and the beginnings of the re-movement of natural wine, the production and the producers have gotten so much better. And they've learned so much through discussion, through sharing, through meals, through visiting each other. One of the really beautiful things that happens in natural wine is they hang out all the time and they drink each other's wines and they party and they visit each other and like they share information. And so in this period of time, without the use of like, any sort of technology, people just like drive over to their neighbors' houses and hang out and have learned a lot over like the last, 40 years or so. So great wine is made in the vineyard as well as in the cellar.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I agree with that. I just had concern that people in the cellar weren't as.
They matter
conscientious.
too.
I
Yeah,
think,
that.
I think it's more romantic to say that great wine is made in the vineyard because it's beautiful, a vineyard. And
Yeah, I mean, there's
like
something
that comes
to that.
in the conversation more.
So,
Look, you can't make great wine without good grapes. That's
Mhm.
for sure.
No. which that's a whole nother
Yeah.
story. What you plant where, if it makes.
But even
sense.
also just raising grapes, like, with how can I say, the chemicals that are permitted in organic viticulture is not easy. Like it's, we're allowed what?
Right.
Copper, sulfur, and nothing.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just that
It's not
on its
like-
own. You have to be a rocket
Right.
scientist that went to spray and how to, and
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
there's an attention and an art to that for sure. Stephanie, I think maybe in the forward, you said something interesting that caught my attention, and it was that no, 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 no.
I'm like,
It,
oh
it was
no.
it was kind of cool. It's that your initial attraction. What Here's what I'm trying to
Mhm.
say. The initial attraction was kind of to the winemaker and the
Mhm.
culture, and not necessarily first the glass of wine. What is this? Who made it? It was sort of like these guys are incredible. This whole thing is incredible, and you make wine, let's taste that. Is that a fair way?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely when I started working in natural wine and like drinking natural wine, I want to say it was like 2012 in Montreal, and a lot of the wine that were coming in were um, crazy. They're wild at that time. I feel like even just Frank Cornelissen's wines, the first vintages that we got in Montreal were wild and crazy. But the way that my brain works to make sense of things and to help differentiate and like memorize things is through stories. So for me to like learn about the winemakers was easier to make sense of it and also to kind of fall in love with it because they kind of become friends in a way even though you haven't met them yet.
Right. And
Yeah.
then eventually the
And eventually you
stories
meet them.
become firsthand
Exactly.
in that sense. All right, I want to take a quick break because we have to slot in our sponsors, underwriters, not advertisers. We're a nonprofit. Um, when we come back, I want to get specifically into the book and talk about some very specific instances. Then I want to do the wine list, and we want to talk about this wine. So you're listening to The Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We're talking to Stephanie, David, and Zev about their new book, Spilled, which just recently got on the market, and towards the end of the show, we'll tell you how to get it. We'll be right back.
Today's program is brought to you by Korin, a supplier of Japanese chef knives and restaurant supplies. Korin is proud of their Japanese culture and traditions, but they want you to know that their products are not just for Japanese restaurants. Their knives and tableware bring out the best qualities of food from every culture and fit into every restaurant from French to Pan-Asian to American. And that is why they're located in New York City, where people from every country in the world come to eat. Korin's Tribeca showroom is home to the most extensive collection of Japanese chef knives in the world, including Japan. Stop by to view their exquisitely designed tableware and the rarest natural sharpening stones. They have a whole range of knife services from repair and rust removal to reshaping and realigning. Korin is dedicated to this ideal, bringing the highest quality Japanese design to your table so you can experience the unparalleled quality of Japanese craftsmanship in your home or restaurant. For more information, visit Korin.com.
All right, we're back. We're back with my guests, Zev Rovin, Stephanie Mercier-Voyer, and the inimitable David McMillan. In the book, you focus on two countries. You focus on France and Italy. They are the longtime hubs of natural wine, so that kind of made sense. You dig into 13 regions. I counted this. I think I'm right. And talk to about 25 producers. And David, from those 25 producers, they generated 34 recipes. Some people had multiple recipes. So picking France and Italy, was obvious. Or I don't know what the word is. Obvious, easy, a good start, because we all know there's plenty of other places. And Zev will tell you about that. But the richness of that region. What about selecting the regions and the winemakers? Because within France and Italy, there's more than 13 regions. So how did you guys decide we're going to, David, help me with my pronunciation, Auvergne? Why there and why not, whatever. Tell me how that.
I think it was a mix of places we wanted to go that made sense for the kinds of wines that we liked most, but I think a lot of it came down to Zev's relationships, to be honest. It's not all Zev producers, but it's mostly Zev producers because of those relationships, to be honest.
Right. And who
Yeah.
cares, by the way?
But there's a lot of
I mean,
winemakers
you got
that we
Elizabeth de Foradori in there.
Yeah.
Who cares, right?
Look, when Steph and Dave approached me about the book, they pitched the idea, and then I thought, well, where did I have incredible meals of beautiful food and wonderful times with people that had something to say about wine, and something to say about like agriculture and the arc of that in the face of industrialization to some degree, which is not necessarily like the theme of the book, but it's the underlying idea in some sort of way.
So that's the real answer. But there's sort of the business end where, how did you come up with the regions you came up with? Kind of naturally gravitated because to what you said, the winemakers like, hey, we should talk to this guy, that guy, he's here.
I mean, part of it is that through the years that I've been traveling, I've found some regions more interesting than others. And I'm not trying to, throw shade on any region, but you'll notice we didn't go to like any of like the most famous wine regions in the world, We didn't go to Bordeaux or Champagne or anything.
But you did 5 Burgundy producers. And I think Burgundy would fall into that category you're trying to escape a little.
Maybe in some way,
5
like
producers
those people,
was the most of any.
Those people, when I go to their house, their food tastes nice and their vibes are cool. And, like we did a lot in the Jura, of course, which is like a place that I've specialized in for a long time, but it's also like a bucolic, special, weird country place. The Auvergne is a place that nobody has heard of for wine for a long time. And now people are starting to hear about it, but, this is not like a famous wine region at all. I mean, the book is decidedly non-comprehensive. You cannot like pass a WSET thing if you read it.
Well, no,
But
that
you
was
can-
never the intention,
No.
right?
That's not the intention.
Yeah.
So we specialized in the regions where like we like to go the most.
It's like really many factors. It's memorable meals that Zev or Dave have had on trips. What made sense logistically, given that our schedules are crazy and we don't have that much time, and then regions that we love, and also producers that made for a good story that were kind of instrumental in
That's obvious.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
it's
you're
it-
right
all
about
these
wine.
I just did a sterile analysis. I go, wow,
No, but
5
you-
Burgundy guys.
Yeah,
But
it is.
but here's the flip side to me. It's like, Jesus, if you're talking about 5 guys in Burgundy, the way people perceive Burgundy or collect, there's a lot more going on. There's these producers that are committed, the way they farm and all that. And that's, what impressed me. I just wanted to point it out. I mean, I love the fact that you put 3 Sicilian producers in, they deserve props. And one of my favorite regions, the Rhone, you talk about, some people there. So I guess what you're saying is you go where the good people are and the stories, right?
I think also, just to, when you're going to write a whole bunch of things about like, what's the story of a winemaker? Like, guy grows grapes, like crushes them, puts them in barrel, like drink wine. Like, you want to also, if you're going to do that 25 times, we also were trying to consider people with a diversity
I
of
have
stories.
instances I want to ask you guys
Okay.
about. I'm not void of that. I want to put my foot in my mouth potentially for a 3rd time with you, okay? It seems to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, that Burgundy of a lot of the wine regions seem to be slow to adopt in a bigger picture to sort of what we've been discussing, our natural wine practices. First of all, is that true?
Everybody's been slow to adopt it. Natural wine is like way less than 1% of the production of wine.
But aren't there regions where the percentages are higher? Isn't Burgundy not one of the best examples?
I mean, there's like a lot of smaller regions in the south, let's say, where land is not as expensive. So the risks are not as high
Right.
to either convert to natural winemaking, or whereas like Burgundy, the land is so high and the risks are so high if you're deciding to either convert or forget about buying land to make natural wine from scratch. It's so expensive.
There's a lot of very good farming in Burgundy.
Yeah.
Maybe some more
Well,
traditional wines being made in
some
the
of the
cellar,
most famous
but
are
it's
biodynamic,
exactly
you know.
right. That you could argue that is DRC natural wine, right? Is
Right.
so many, right? So
I don't know
We
why.
claim it. DRC's ours.
Do we claim it?
I don't know why I'm picking on Burgundy.
Can't afford
No,
it,
but
but
it's
we
true.
claim
It is like a huge wine region that produces so much wine, and so much of it is conventional.
Right.
You know, just like
Wine.
15 years ago, Burgundy looked like the moon.
I know.
You know, now, you know, you can see the vineyards that look like the moon, but there's a lot.
So
Yeah.
There's little movement. There's little movements of
there's
this
some
everywhere.
transformation, right?
There's little movements of
Okay.
this everywhere, and there's like no movement happening almost everywhere. Also, you know, I do think that the you know, I'm gonna maybe make up a statistic, but somebody told it to me once. But I think that Jura is the place with the highest percentage of organic viticulture in Europe. Something like that.
Do you know why that is, though? I heard a story from Ganva, okay? Because what's the number one? So let's say Champagne's number one export is Champagne. The Burgundy's number one export is the wine of Burgundy. What's the number one export of the Jura?
Jeez.
Comté.
Comté.
Comté is very, very important, right? So,
pretty
and
good, too.
notice that the cows are always on the flats, and the vineyards are always up in the right.
So it's a dedication to what's important.
No, you're in a lot of trouble
If
you do nefarious things in the vineyard and you find anything in the water or the grass that the cows are eating. You do not want a fight against the cheesemakers of Comté. They will wreck you and ruin your life. It's a worldwide product. It's like Parmesan cheese.
Yeah.
There isn't a grocery store on earth you can't find Comté.
No.
Right?
and it's wonderful.
So
too.
because of the Comté, the wine is tended to be more, you know, naturally farmed.
That's a point that's there that you don't think about, or it's not obvious until it's,
God, they build
Well,
they
but
build overpasses
That's
for
the
cows.
fun. That's the fun of going to winemakers' houses and drinking with
All
them
right, so
until
let-
late in the night, because you get these
let's-
stories about like these little
that's-
things, and you don't realize why one thing leads to
that's
another.
where I
But maybe
wanna-
it's because the cows.
That's where I want to go now. Like I mentioned, there were like 25 producers. We can't talk about all of them. I took the liberty because it would stall things if I said, "What's your favorite?" or "Who should we talk about?" A few things stood out to me. I thought the story of Lolita Sene, to me, is an unusual wine person, and this is interesting. She's sort of a self-proclaimed YouTube winemaker.
Yeah.
She said, when I needed to figure something out, I'd go on YouTube and watch it. You don't hear that a lot in wine. Who wants to talk about her a little? Tell me a little about the story, and it's a little unconventional, but that's what you guys are in the book is about. So tell me a little about.
I mean, Lolita's
I mean,
a
a
young
Coke
winemaker. I
addict.
feel like we're the same age, and to write that piece, I did watch a bunch. We spent some time with her, had a wonderful evening and dinner with her, and then we met her at a bunch of wine fairs after that. But interviewed her, but I also watched interviews that she did about her previous book, which was about her life as a club promoter and doing a bunch of drugs and kind of going blind for a couple of days even. Things got really dark for her, and then one day she decided to kind of change everything and was considering what her options were, what her interests were.
She kind of crawled into wine. It wasn't like boom,
Yeah.
which
It
is
didn't
kind of
happen.
cool too.
It happened like slowly yet really fast in a way. She moved to Vancouver in Canada and then was writing about wine, working in restaurants, then came back to France and wanted to make wine but thought it would take a little longer. But right away someone offered her grapes and a place to start making wine, and she really wanted to do it. But it happened so fast that's why she was like, okay, I've got like a bunch of mentors, but also turned to YouTube for little things in the vineyard and in the cellar to figure it out. And that feels very much of like my generation. If I don't know how to do anything, like let's say I'm at the restaurant, a pipe breaks or, some electrical problem, I'm going on YouTube to figure it out instead of asking people or calling an electrician.
Well, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Zev, describe her wines to me. She's in Uze in the Rhone.
Uzès. She's in the Gard, which is like this sort of region that's off the Rhone, around the area of Tavel, which is sort of the most famous part of it. And it's a hot, dry place, and so I think one of the and of course heat and dryness leads to generally higher alcohol and more tannin. And I think one of the things that natural winemakers in the climate change era have been dealing with is how to make, fresh wines with like, fruit forward, bright acidity, easier to drink, nicer wines in those sorts of climates. And I think she's really succeeded in that. And some of that is through different types of macerations, carbonic and whatever, through different moments of harvesting, through different methods of leaf thinning and things to be able to control maturity in the grapes and everything. And so there's a lot of little things you do to arrive at that, and I think that's one of her great skills, is that she's been able to take like a warm, dry area and still produce a fresh, really fun, fruity wine.
David, do you remember the recipe for
What is it?
Lolita?
It's
Does
it's her
Tagine.
it's her grandmother's lamb recipe with couscous.
Yeah, it's a solid recipe.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm a classically trained chef, so
All right,
a lot
so-
of these recipes were like, this is wrong.
So here's a good time to jump into that.
Yeah.
So your presence, contribution, expertise was on the recipe and cook side. You talked about it a little before. So part of the whole circle of, the winemakers, where they are, who they are, them taking you in, cooking the food was, and you experienced some of these recipes dozens of times at people's houses. Your job was to come in and basically do some translation and interpretation, right?
Somewhat, yeah, just a little bit of surgery. Because, I used to laugh with Steph. It's like, this is a little bit like the unprofessional cooking of professional winemakers. Could be another title for the book.
That's kind of exactly what it is.
In my world, whether, I'm cooking in New York City or anywhere, like if we do a Blanquette de Veau anywhere on earth with professional cooks, it's kind of done the same way. Then I have to do Robineau's Blanquette de Veau, and I'm like, this is the work of an insane person.
But you can
Like
take
none of
yourself-
these steps are right.
You can
Tastes good. Tastes so good though.
works.
Like,
but
it's
wait,
really good in
we're
the
gonna
end.
we're gonna end with Robineau because But you could take yourself out of this and
Yeah.
understand the
But
task
also,
and say,
I'll
screw my classic training. I want people to be able to do this.
Yeah, but I still have to make it make sense, right?
Right.
Because some of the recipes are just rambling, and how can I say? If I know that my colleagues and other chefs and professional cooks of the world are going to look at these recipes, and I was like, well, we have to have an addendum somehow that these,
Didn't
I
write
did the
those.
best that I could at respecting the original way that the
Understanding
recipes
the
are written.
task.
Yeah, I would never take Robineau's recipe and redo it
Right.
into a
This
classic.
is what he should be doing.
But no,
Listen,
but what he
you
does
didn't do
works and
that.
people love it, right? To me, it looks, as a professional cook, it looks wrong, but I fixed it to the home cook to be able to do the Robineau recipe in the way
But is it-
Robineau does.
it's more making it easy and usable.
Well, yeah, there
for
was
the
one
reader,
step.
right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I think
you
there
have
was
to take yourself out of all this hoity-toity training.
there was one step
it.
where he boils the cubes, I believe, but then you have to put the pot in the fridge for 48 hours with
Yeah.
the broth, and I'm like, I'm not writing that.
I mean, a lot.
That's insane.
A lot of those recipes came to us they're essentially like scans or like a photo of a piece of paper, handwritten, the kind of recipes your grandmother would have like tucked in a drawer
yeah.
in a book somewhere, and that's been passed down or like taped on the fridge. And every time I've like done recipes from friends or from those winemakers based on that, you realize in making it that half the steps are missing or half the ingredients are missing because they're just like, yeah, of course you
Right.
add this at that time.
It's second
So,
nature to them.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
methodology is
But-
there's no methodology.
Part of the process was you guys were at someone's house, experienced their meal, decided they were going to be part of the book.
Mhm.
You asked them, we would like to talk about you, your wines, and this recipe. So you said, can you give me the recipe?
Yeah, a lot of the times,
And that's,
That we worked from
Yeah.
pictures and
Passed
the
off.
recipe.
and the recipe,
Like
yeah.
before I saw the picture,
you didn't
was it Cornelissian soup that
Oh,
I was like, what is this? It's just spaghetti soup with
oh, no,
cherry
that's
tomatoes. I was like,
Cantina
But you,
Merlina.
you
It's-
said earlier you didn't travel to much of these places,
No.
so you didn't experience a lot of this
Mhm.
stuff firsthand.
I have in my own like life traveled and eaten
Yeah,
at
I
winemakers'
forgot
homes.
about that.
That's where how can I say, the idea came from.
I forgot about that.
from that, right?
That's fair.
But took a lot of photos and videos for Dave so that when it came down to editing those recipes and making them usable for a wider audience, that he would have the visuals and the understanding of what it was if he hadn't had it firsthand.
So I want to talk about two more people. I want to talk about Elizabeth de Foradori, for a lot of reasons that I think is important to this book. Incredible winemaker, incredibly influential, a figure. But what fits nicely in this book is she also becomes a cheesemaker.
Mhm.
You know, you become a farmer, you become a winemaker. She's now making cheese, and her recipe is zucchini with, I guess, the cheese that she makes.
Yeah.
That's a good story.
It is. Cheesemakers are always super interesting, especially when they're, that's a true, like even more than making wine. I find cheese making, raising animals to make pure milk, to make cheese is
Right.
very,
It's a whole different.
it's very impressive.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed with that. Yeah.
It's I saw Theo, her son, at Convivio del Vino in New York this weekend, and he's doing a lot of the heavy lifting. She's obviously, making cheese.
We had her daughter in Montreal with us
Yeah.
for a couple of years.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah?
Myrta was in Montreal, and she was farming just outside of Montreal, but also kind of helping with some of the restaurant gardens in the city. And that soup, the zucchini, it's actually Myrta who's growing all the gardens at Foradori. And the recipe is incredibly simple, but it kind of hinges on the quality of those zucchinis and how fresh they
Right.
were. And because we tried the soup and we're like, this is the best thing we've ever had, but it only makes sense if you're using like fresh, like in season, like incredible zucchini. And what Foradori is so great at is that it integrates like the winemaking and the organic farming, and even now with like they have these cows in the mountains.
Great cows.
We didn't have time to go see the cows, which I was really sad about, but they're beautiful. And Elizabeth, after a lifetime of making wine, was interested in a different kind of fermentation and making cheese.
So, when you say it that way, to me, Jean-Pierre Robinot kind of epitomizes, what you're trying to do in the book. But I think Elisabetta checks that
Mhm.
because of the food, the commitment, the shift. That's kind of what the book is about. The story of who she is, the wine, what else she's doing, how she integrates everything. Let's talk about Jean-Pierre Robinot. He kind of, and we talked about him a little, he kind of epitomizes what you wanted to accomplish. He's an influential figure, which is why you would chase him down and write about him. He's a great winemaker. His wines are interesting. Certainly, you guys have gone out of your way to say he's a personality. I think you said he's no ordinary man.
Yeah.
And I guess you could say not every wine guy is like that, right?
No one is like Jean-Pierre.
And with his wife, a heck of a cook, because I think you did a couple of recipes. Tell me a little about him. I mean, he's a pretty important figure.
Yeah, I think Jean-Pierre's story is very interesting and long. I mean, he was a
Plumber.
He was a plumber. He moved to
For 20 years.
he moved to Paris when he was 14 or 15 with like 400 francs in his pocket, kind of thing, and figured out how to survive. And eventually was a bistro man, and is like, if you've spent any time with him, is just like a very eccentric guy that gives, that speaks. He talks about space a lot. He really likes the moon, but he likes rocket ships, and he likes, just
Cosmo.
the cosmos.
Pretty eclectic.
And so he's just he's a funny and entertaining guy, and so he's sort of the ultimate bistro guy. And in Paris in the 80s, he opened a bistro called L'Angevin, which is sort of it's a play on words, but he was, we forget it's one thing to make natural wine, but we forget that most people that make wine are farmers, and they're quiet, and they're contemplative people. And to have a showman selling it is a big important part of the process of getting wine all the way to the end, right? Which is like somebody drinking it, having a nice time. And Jean-Pierre is the consummate guy like that. And so from, he was the great promoter of natural wine in the 80s and the 90s.
Right.
And then in 2001, 2002, he moved back to the town he grew up in, the house that he grew up in a little town called Châaigne, which is like one road that sort of snakes through, 30 buildings or something. And it's where Pinot Donis is from, which has become famous, and Chenin Blanc.
It's a thing now.
It's a thing now. And, he's one of sort of the pioneers of Petnat and all these sort of things. And he's one of like the innovators of process actually with that. And so I think he took his plumbing skills, and applied that to Petnat production, a guy who can work with his hands, a guy that knows how to,
That's funny.
twist a thing and fix a thing. And when, you learn those types of skills from doing construction work. And winemaking's, not that far from that. It's little problems that you learn how to fix. And so, he took all of that and put it together into something that I think are really, special and singular wines.
David, you remember what is it, the veal stew? Is that him?
Yes.
That was the one that drove you a little crazy, right?
No, I was just, it was the most far-fetched one, the most like, let's say, incorrect recipe, but it makes sense.
That's so funny because you guys have eaten it and it was in the environment with the wines, with Jean-Pierre. It's incredible. And then he's sitting here saying it's
Look,
incorrect.
I think it's very worth saying about a lot of the recipes in this book is that like you can find them on the internet about like these things, Blanquette de Veau. There's a lot of recipes out there for Blanquette de Veau, like
which David's very familiar
right.
with.
I mean, we have Boeuf Bourguignon in the book. That we're not like writing a new. We're not.
No,
it's not new.
This is this guy's recipe.
But this is the way that he does it.
Yeah,
and so
right.
like there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. And he does it wrong. It doesn't mean that it's not delicious and wonderful and special. And so we're trying to show a little bit like, the delicious, wonderful, special version of it that they make. You can the right version's like
That's
at your
the way to
fingertips.
present it.
Yeah, it's like the way my mom makes spaghetti sauce is wrong, but I
it's
love
delicious,
it.
yeah.
It's
But I
delicious.
love
She
it. It's
doesn't use
delicious.
ketchup.
No, she doesn't use
Thank God.
ketchup, but she puts so much shit in there.
Carrot, onion, celery.
Carrot, onion, lentils. There's like so much
Right,
stuff in
yeah.
there and meat.
But that's
And I'm like, okay, it's not
our
correct.
sauce to you, not the sauce.
That's very Quebecois.
Yeah.
I think
It's a whole meal in one
that's
sauce.
It's basically a soup.
Yeah.
that story sort of epitomizes what the recipes are.
Yeah.
They are what they are. David, we talked about how he tried to transform them so the reader can do that. Is there anyone else? I know everyone is worth mentioning, but before we close the book on talking about the winemakers and their food, is there anyone else that we shouldn't pass on, or those were good examples?
Oh, that's like picking
All right,
favorite
Jen.
child.
I liked rewriting the Kenjiro Kagami recipes a lot.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about French food, and all of a
Right.
sudden we're doing like, how can I say,
Well,
home Japanese salads for lunch,
Mhm.
like shredded
I'm going
carrots.
to come back to you. Zev, just set up that story, the winemaker, Kenjiro.
Oh, okay. So Kenjiro Kagami is a Japanese guy who moved to a tiny place in Jura somehow, through Alsace and through the southern parts of Jura with Genva, and started a little winery that now a lot of people want, despite the fact that there's not much of it. And so that creates like a sort of a funny situation. But he has really, really beautiful little property of 3.5 hectare, one sort of like bowl of a hillside
in Gruce.
in Gruce,
Yeah, so
which is a
pretty.
tiny little place. And he lives there at peace and happiness with nature and makes nice wines.
What were the recipes?
Well, it's not the Japanese cooking, let's say, that we're aware of.
Right,
This is like what Japanese farmers would eat at lunch in their homes.
which a
So
lot
it's
of
like
people are not exposed to.
Exactly.
There's a carrot salad.
Such a
with
soup, yeah.
lentil
That's ballsy to
and
put in a
shiso.
cookbook, like a shredded carrot salad with sesame seeds and a vinaigrette with shiso. But
That's
eating
like at
it,
a
you're
bad
like, this is
buffet without
beautiful.
the shiso.
Yeah.
That is so good.
I think if I could add like one of the, the book's like chopped into a couple of things. One part is the trip that we did in Italy, one part is the trip that we did in France, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, we need to do one more trip, and it turned out that we were like approaching harvest time, and so we're like, okay, well, why don't we just go harvest with everybody, and we'll do a third of the book basically on like harvest meals. And so that is a third of the book, and that's one of the things that we did with Kenjiro. It's not those meals are not the meals that
In his home.
it's in his home,
But
it's in his home, but it's not they don't have the time necessarily to make the like sort of really nice big meal that
Right.
they would make your guests if
it's
they
a
knew
hearty
you were coming.
harvest.
Yeah,
meal.
it's not the
Over.
Friday night for 6 dinner. It's more like the harvest lunch
Right.
for 30.
But
Right.
it was still so pretty.
Well, I'm that how many
And it was beautiful, it was great, but we wanted to highlight that food too, with just like one little highlight from the book, if I could. Domaine Valette is like a great producer that we really love, and Philippe's mother was cooking for they have 13, 14 hectares, so you have quite a lot of people, 50, 60 people working, maybe 30, 40 people working on something like that, and she was telling us that this was her 50th harvest meal that she cooked
wow.
for all these people.
Yeah, that's wild.
And so you think about you just think about that, and like that was an exciting part of the book, and it was it was cannelle. It wasn't again nothing like
I mean, there's
groundbreaking that's not
in the
that you
book we
can't
have
find,
the
but
onion
the
soup
food was amazing.
and the pot, the size of the pot that she made. I could have fit in that pot, It
Well,
curled up
I
in a
love
ball.
that onion soup too. It's actually,
Really
It's a
good.
good recipe.
but
Yeah.
it's a great recipe, and
It's not
it's
a
so
baked cheese
absolute.
one, is it?
No, it's not. It's basically an onion broth.
But
Right.
it's
a lot.
grated Comté,
It's
like,
blonde
on
as
top.
opposed to being dark brown, and the treatment of just hand torn croutons with a little bit of cheese is
Right.
it's quite brilliant in its simplicity. And when you see a recipe like that, you're like, oh. I showed it to a couple of my cook friends, and they were like,
So good.
God, that's an easy one. I bet it's killer. It is.
And you think you think from their perspective too. It's like you also need to nourish. You need to like give energy for all these people
Right.
too. So they're thinking about that in those meals, and that's part of like the calculus. How do I cook for a lot of people? How do I give them calories? How do I make it delicious?
Right.
And
delicious.
like and they're incredibly good at that.
I
And
mean,
it's
I would
so nice.
take that or any Joe Beef family meal over half the crap that I eat in restaurants, just because the heart and soul and thought and the point of it. I mean, I think it's terrific, right?
Yeah, it is. And again, it's that's a beautiful recipe.
Yeah.
It's fun to look at because it makes you question simplicity.
Right. Simplicity that works. All right, we got to wrap up. I want to go to the wine list, but how would you tell people the best way to use this book? I want to hear it from everybody. Like, you bought the book. I like the podcast. I like the premise. I read a review. How should I use it?
I mean, I wrote about that in the book. I think there's many ways to use it.
Well, give
It
me
can be
some.
used as, coffee table book. You never open it, and it just looks pretty.
It has
and-
those chops.
Yeah, and that's okay. I'm fine with that. I think my favorite way to use it would be kind of to read it like a magazine, where you can kind of pick it up at any point and just read
so
a
you can
profile.
jump around.
Yeah, you can
You
jump
don't
around
need to
it.
go cover to cover.
Yeah, and we designed the table of content in such a way that you can use it as a cookbook. Like the recipes are separate. You can just jump straight to the recipes. If you want to learn about a specific region, you can just find it right away, or a specific winemaker. You can kind of jump around in different ways. Like Zev said earlier, you won't use it to pass your WSET.
No.
But if you want to learn a little bit, the basics, if you're really new to natural wine, it'll give
I
you.
told you, it's succinct and
Yeah.
done very well in that sense. David, if you just isolated the recipes, whatever they are, the 36 recipes, and made a nice little book, and you explain the premise, I mean, is this a good cookbook in the context?
No,
it's
I love
great.
it. I love it. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the way that it came together. Plus, it was I don't know, because of COVID, and like I think we've gone through like complete staff changes at Rizzoli in production. Like the people who actually put the book out were not the people who gave us the book deal.
Really.
Yeah, and times 3. I think we went through 3 different managers.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's even made is cool. The fact that it's done is cool. And again, to go back to what before your question before, like there's some great Saturday project recipes in that book. If you want to tackle that the morel chicken, that's a great Saturday. Go to the market at lunch and tackle that one for dinner. The beef bourguignon is quite special. The sauce is a little bit more reductive. All the vegetables are basically pan roasted separately. It's a very cool Saturday project recipe. There's a bunch of good Saturday project recipes in there.
The what was it, chicken with morels?
Yeah.
I mean, the picture caught my attention, which
So
is
pretty.
a good time to bring up Xavier Terra again.
Yeah.
He shot all the photos.
He did.
And he shot them on film.
Yeah, everything
which
is
gave
shot on
him some
film.
texture, which is really cool. Because I would say that the stories, the wine, the food, and the pictures, those four elements are as equally captivating and impressive. I think it's not the same book without the photos.
Absolutely.
It's not the same book without, the recipes. And I think people get a little insight that, hey, this is this guy's recipe. But
I think when you write a book, you have to fight for the book, right?
Yeah.
When we wrote the first Joe Beef cookbook, it was heralded as a book that changed the way that cookbooks were written at that time. But we fought tooth and nail, to have so many photos in it, and basically a photo recipe, thumbnails, and the editors weren't having it. And so, I think we brought a little bit that back in this book as well, to just very fight for pictures and fight to get more in and fight for beauty.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a high risk by Xavier's decision to shoot everything on film, because we're going to winemakers' houses that are not very well lit a lot of the times. You don't know exactly what's going to happen. You don't know what's. So we had to reshoot some recipes.
You did.
But everything is on film. But the idea of shooting on film not only is what Xavier does all the time for all of his photography, but it was also to give it that life. We didn't want it to feel sterile. It felt like it was shot in a studio. We wanted it to feel like the trips and like natural wine. It's a little gritty. It's a little like
it wasn't shot in the studio. It was literally shot in everybody's living room.
Exactly.
And
Yeah,
on their dining
The
room.
first time we
with whatever lighting was.
I'm looking
happening,
at the
that's
table,
literally
like
it.
what's that? And
Yeah.
that, I'm looking at everything, because
Yeah.
everything was sort of.
I think the first time we submitted photos, they panicked.
they were so mad.
What is this?
Because
Yeah.
everybody was smoking in every picture, and then there was a weird amount of
It's
pictures of toilet bowls.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, we took
I've got a
photos of
certain
all
interest in like the magazines next to
There's
toilets
a-
and wineries.
in a winemaker's bathroom is where, especially French winemakers, every bathroom in their house we would go into, it would be like all of those like wine posters that you see at wine fairs, wine art, all those wine magazines. So we asked Xavier to take photos of all of them.
Tractor
And then
magazines, stuff like
we
this.
submitted that to Rizzoli, and they were like, "Why is it just cigarettes and toilets?" And they were so mad and didn't understand the
You
vision.
don't get it.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Thankfully, I had other photos. Actually.
I guess all of you could jump in on this question. Are there enough winemakers and recipes still out there to do another book or an updated edition, or
Oh yeah.
is that in the
Yeah.
scopes?
I think it's not in
Can
the
you see
scope,
that?
but I think Eastern
That-
Europe would be cool.
I mean, we could do 20 of these
Yeah.
based on like the material that's like out in the world, like
Virtually
farmers
everyone
making
has
nice
a-
food and stuff. Like we could do one in Japan. We could do them in Central Europe. We could do them.
You're right.
Somebody could do one in Georgia. We could do it in Spain. You could
Spain,
look. You
Portugal.
could do it in California, in Vermont, and you could do it in Quebec, and you could do it all over the place. People, you could definitely do a million of these. Whether or not like we have like the life left in us
Well,
after like
that's-
doing this is a completely different question.
I just always wonder, like, I'm reading your stuff, at the beginning, it's a lot of you, and I'm looking at the pictures, and I'm like, I guess, like, Jean-Pierre Robineau, you're at the guy's house 8 hours, like, hammering how much wine?
So much.
I mean, aren't you just totally, like...
I've done that day. That day was we wrote that chapter in that day, but I do that the Tuesday after La Dive every year for 17 years.
Mhm.
It's like you almost
So
have to go to the
it's
gym
not
for
like
it.
we actually didn't do anything different than the thing that I do once a year at it, and it's a very long tasting, and it's there's a rhythm to it, and it's really nice, and
Well, you
we wanted to also just express like that feeling. You know, how you're a little bit tired. You're spitting, but like you're kind of, a little bit goes in, and so you have sort of like you're in the clouds a little bit, and then the terrine comes, and then then the salad comes. It's picked from the vines, and that feels really nourishing, and then and then eventually the blanquette comes, and then you sit, and then you sort of like get low and tired, and then there's dessert, and then there's coffee, and there's the whole progression of the thing. And I feel like with the photos and with the story and with the the whole thing of that visit, you got like a little bit of that
That's a good.
exhaustion
I
from a day
think
like
that's
that.
where Xavier's photos
Yeah.
really kind of fill in, what's going on there.
I think my favorite photo in the book is from the Robineau profile, is the one where he comes through the door
Right.
and Noella is sitting down, and you can
The
hear
look on her face.
being like, "Ugh,
Right.
he's doing this again." He comes out
But
with
like
bottles
60
and
years of it, like
yeah, and it's
nothing
like
new.
the Jean-Pierre show starting.
She
But-
rolls her eyes, but she smiles just a
Yeah.
little
Right.
in that picture
Ah,
too, and
it's
it's
so good.
I love
nice.
that.
and you can hear the photo. It's beautiful.
All right, so that's the book. That's some of the people in the book and kind of the gist of how it's covered. Let's do the wine list. Let's do it quickly. I'm going to ask 5 questions. We'll go from left to right. So the first answer will be Zeb, then Stephanie, then David. Don't dwell on these answers. Don't go too long. I want to get you guys out of here soon. So the first question is, what are you drinking now? The context is seasons change. Maybe you're traveling. You want to try stuff over and above work. I mean, what's in the fridge?
I mean, my fridge is insane.
Nothing.
You're literally in my fridge. I have
Okay.
25
So what do
bottles in
you-
the room we're sitting in. But I'll say that the thing that I'm most excited about right now is the Savoie. I'm really very into Alpine wines. We talked a little bit earlier about like the era of climate change and everything, and I think that Savoie has for a long time not reached their potential of good winemaking, and I think that right now they're like really making nice wines.
Do you have a producer or two that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I love Jean-Yves Perron. I've been importing for a very long time.
Spell?
Peron.
Peron?
Yeah,
Okay.
Jean-Yves, the kind of the first guy who did macerations of white wines in France. Brand new one called Domaine des Albatros. Domaine des Albatros. That guy was a marine biologist in Antarctica for a long time, and
story.
Classic path to
classic
winemaking.
path and moved back.
All right, those are good because I have 3 of you. I'm going to keep it. Steph, what are you drinking now?
What am I'm
Outside of work, in your fridge, seasonal changes, something new, curious
I mean,
about?
I'm drinking a lot of Miller High Life, I would
All
say.
right, I'm okay with that.
But in terms of wine, I mean, Zev can attest to that. I'm pretty much always the same. I'll drink white wine from Jura and Burgundy. Like, we're right now pouring some red wine from Maison Menade, Katie's wines I love.
We're
Yeah.
going to talk about that in a minute. All right, so that's good. David, are you drinking?
Yeah, absolutely. More I'm more a Saturday night with the wife drinker,
Right.
or restaurant with the
You're
kids.
picking your spots more carefully.
Yeah, I'm better managed, and yeah. So I drink my neighbor's wines. I drink oddly a lot of Quebec wines. So I've been tasting a lot of the wines from the grapes from my farm at Sœur Racine, a vineyard in near me in Stanbridge. Sœur Racine, the sisters' roots, the root sisters.
Got it.
And of course, Pervenche, Mike Marler in Quebec, Pervenche celebrating their 30th anniversary. I've just recently started tasting, their Céval and their Chardonnays over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm always just so impressed. I really classify those wines as world class.
Right.
I often prefer drinking Chardonnay from Pervenche than given the opportunity sometimes to drink even Jura or Burgundies.
Isn't Chardonnay your favorite?
I do.
Great.
I'm still.
All right, I didn't
unfortunate.
mention I post these answers on our social media. All right, so this is the goofiest question, but this is so appropriate for you guys in this book. And the question is favorite wine and food pairing. Not what we would vote as the best wine and food, but what's yours? And it's obviously something you don't make or eat that often. But when you do, or when you think about it, it's like, wow, that works, or ooh,
I'm to be contrarian, but like I don't like normally try to think of it like that.
Just
I
give
try to
me
think
the
good.
damn
All right,
answer.
all right. I really like Vin Jaune and Comté. Tastes good.
To me, that's like
And
that's
my-
contrarian.
No, I
It's
was going
con-
to say something contrarian. You told me not to, so I didn't.
No, give me the contrarian one.
Now, my contrarian answer is that like food pairings are kind of bullshit. Really good wine and really good food go so nice together, and if either of those are not that good, then it just doesn't.
So
do
I
me.
want you to know that a fifth of the answers to that question is food and wine pairings are bullshit, or I don't have any, or just being with friends. It's irrelevant with
Sure.
the food. So that vein is
already
totally
done.
real and acceptable.
Okay,
But I'm trying to be kind of base and say, just tell me what you like.
okay. Vin Jaune Comté.
I mean, that same answer. I really don't think about wine pairing at all, or don't really. Yeah, it's really not something that I think about. But I am always really impressed when I am poured something with a dish and it goes really
And
well.
it
I don't
works
have
well.
anything that like comes to mind.
So
but
that's an answer.
yeah, but Will
that-
Piper at Horseman is the king of that. You'll be having a meal and he'll just pour you one sip of something and you're like,
That's the perfect match.
yeah, and it.
All right,
Changes
David, am I
everything.
going to get lectured, or do you have an answer?
I don't. I hate to say, but I feel like I've fought against that a good part of my career, where a lot of chefs that I've worked for, and having conversations with sommeliers, always trying to pigeonhole us with wine and food pairings, and I just said no. Like I drink white wine with steak.
Right.
I don't care, and I
Right.
totally don't want to be made to feel weird about it.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
That's all I need.
You may as well ballot
Which
and
is what I
cheese.
said. It's the goofiest and most controversial question.
That's my
think we
favorite.
should-
All right, third question, and all of you should be good at this. I'm asking you, and then I'll kind of give you a little direction. Favorite wine restaurant and or bar. I'm not asking you for your top 3 or your all-time favorites. I'm asking you to give me an answer. And if I was asked that question, I would say Chambers, because I think Pascaline Lepelletier is the best. The vibe there is great. The food's great. The wine list is I would say Four Horsemen comes up on that answer is much or more than anything. So those are the type of answers I'm looking for. So I'm throwing Chambers and Four Horsemen in. But give me places like that, and we're not picking favorites. It's not like the whole world listens to this, where somebody's going to say, Zev, how come you didn't mention my restaurant? I buy a shitload of
I'm
wine
not going
from
to
you."
answer the question about an American restaurant. I promise
Give
you
me-
that. I don't care.
What about in Europe?
Vervolet.
I mean, I love the Vervolet, but everybody knows.
Where is that?
It's in Paris, and it is like one of the first like natural wine bistros there, opened in like 2001 or something.
It's still
like that.
around?
It's still around. It's spectacular. The vibes are incredible. It's also a place I've done a lot of wine research. They have great stuff. They made Drouet. It's like the only thing that doesn't leave the menu, which is like one of the grossest things there is. So you can have that there. I think Le Baratin, if you're listen to this soon, you should go, because it's a
Closing?
very special place.
Oh.
It will eventually close. It's been open for 40 something years,
Wow.
and at some point here they're going to come to their end. But it's the type of tiny, unpretentious bistro, that where the food is really incredible, but there's nothing fruity about it,
Right.
and the wine is really great, and there's no
There's a handful of places like that, which is
there's
a nice
there's
thing.
a lot of places.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great restaurants in the world.
All right,
World's full
Steph?
of them.
I'm a company woman through and through.
Four Horsemen, I told you we'll give you that.
I mean, it's silly,
but
but
do
it's
you have
still,
a place that you would go to that you admire? Just the.
I mean, I like a lot of like the French restaurants. Like I love going to Vaudor, but that to me again is like the personal relationship. So if I have like a personal relationship with Jorge or Emily there, I know they know what I like or they know what
But
I would
those-
like to try.
Those are places
Yeah.
because of those people.
Exactly.
So I mean, Le Vaudor, which is an interesting story because Jorge's there, makes the wine story even more
Mhm.
interesting. So that's fair. We'll take those. David, I think I'm more interested in anything around Saint Armand.
Yeah, there's not much. There's not much in Saint Armand, unfortunately. We can't even buy a bottle of water in my neighborhood. I think you have to drive like
There's
8
no
kilometers to get a
neighborhood.
bottle of water. There's no neighborhood. There you go. You know, I'm still how can I say? I cut my teeth at L'Express as a kid, as a young cook.
Still
You know,
good?
it's still fantastic, and it's always had
so
a
good.
well-priced
Yeah.
wine list. There's never forget, if you listen to this podcast and you end up there, there's a second wine list called the Parallel Wine List. Ask your waiter for it; they'll bring it out. The regular wine list is, maybe 200 listings, and the Parallel Wine List adds another 250 to 300.
Wow,
Yeah, and
that's a
and
good one.
yeah, sure, and you can still like drink things like Ravno there for $100.
Oh wow,
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's open like 19 hours a day.
that's like cheaper than retail.
I think I think they put 25, 30, $40 on top of whatever the cost is of the wine. You can.
This is a selfish request. I have to go to a wedding in June in Toronto. Where should I go there? Do you know anything about Toronto or not really?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, like the places we've mentioned, either a
like-
wine bar or Stephanie.
Bernard's, Dreyfus.
Yeah, Bernard's, Dreyfus, those restaurants are
Maddie's
ex
Place.
ex Joe Beef people that run that.
Okay.
Really,
good enough.
really great.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
All right,
awesome.
2 more questions. Fourth question is favorite all-time wine. I put that question on the list to ask Zev, Stephanie, David, and you guys have been around wine. The most expensive rare wine you ever drank. I could give a shit about that. Here's what I'm looking for. What's that wine to you that was important, that illuminated things to you, that is
Susukaru.
Susukara? The first time you had it? Franklin
I,
Nelson?
Frank Nelson. Back then it was called Contadino. But
When was that?
I first tasted Contadino in 2007, 2008. And I never had anything like it.
What was it about that,
Well, I think maybe at the time I didn't really know what VA was, so I thought that was pretty fun. And like Mouse was new to me, so I thought that was pretty sick. But in a little bit more seriousness, it was, it had tartrate in it. It wasn't filtered. It was in this clear bottle. It was like
Right.
a see-through red wine.
crazy?
It
like,
was made on a
type.
volcano, like in a place. We forget Etna's like, if you're in wine, Etna's a famous place now. But back then, nobody had ever heard of it. So it was made on a
More to the
volcano with
mystique.
grapes that nobody knew about. With this weird like Belgian mountain climber, with a wolf for a dog. It turned out it wasn't a wolf. It was just a husky. It was called Wolf. It's called Lupo.
All right,
And
so-
I don't know. Anyway, it changed my perspective. First, it changed the course of my life.
right. And that was when you were starting the business.
That was right when I
right
started.
around then, right? So the impression then was important. Stephanie?
I'm trying to go through like the catalog in my brain of all the wines. I mean, Susukaru was definitely like Susukaru, the rosé or Contadino. Like in those early years, that was kind of a revelation because it didn't feel like wine. It felt like another category, and that's what kind of exploded my brain and really turned me on to natural wine. But right now, if I see anything by Maison Valette on the list, that's what I'm getting. Doesn't matter what else is on the list.
Who was in the book?
That's what I'm getting.
That's a good one. David?
I hate to say it, but
Your
Like,
neighbors?
no, I drank like my come to hither moment was Lapierre in the 90s.
Mm.
When he was still alive, the wines were very different, and
But you
we
knew
were
of-
selling California wine at that time in Montreal, or Australian wine, and and all of a sudden there was a wine agent, a friend of mine, Jean Philippe from Raisin, and he was showing up with very.
But you knew the story. I mean,
Yeah,
it
of
wasn't
course.
just the wine. It's like these guys were like. the
But it
guys.
was very different for us to drink when we were used to drinking fairly New World wines. My first bottle of Morgon from Lapierre was, I need to know more about this, and that started like the process. And I still
that same wine is the wine that turned Jean-Pierre Robineau into natural
Yeah.
wine.
Yeah.
It was a bottle
Yeah.
of La Pierre Morgon. I mean, for me too. This is a very special wine.
we can open bottles and bottles and bottles, but even like it'll always have a special. When I see a cork being pulled on, I'm always like, oh,
It's the
like it just
blueprint.
warms me a little bit. I'm like, oh, this is fun.
I'm happy to say I have a lot in my cellar. For some reason, I got exuberant like
Never stop.
7, 8, 9 years ago when
Good for
somebody
you.
told me then what we're talking about today. And when I tasted it, it was like, Jesus Christ. All right, last question. Here's the question, but we'll approach it differently. I want you guys to recommend to me the best wine around 15, 20, 22 bucks, red and white. Sometimes you can go category, like Muscadet is a category. They make good wines there, and they're reasonable. Tell me, and I'm fine if every answer you give me is your wines. Tell me best value wines, best value to quality, trying to stay on the lower end.
Can I just defer
Red,
to Zev?
white.
I don't know wine prices at all.
Okay,
I'm gonna not say wineries. I'm gonna do some generalization.
go.
The south of France, I think, is the place in the world with like the most amount of grapes, and there's a lot of really good natural wines there because
What are some, like, are
Um,
there regions or?
the
it's just-
Languedoc generally,
Mhm.
Which is a big
um,
growing area,
which is
right?
a big growing area, and it sort of gets a reputation for like mass production, co-op sort of wine, and there's tons of that there, indeed.
But is
But
that
there's also
is
small
that where the
pockets where there's-
story goes? Land is cheaper there,
Yeah.
so like natural and newer guys are
Yeah,
going
look,
there
if you're a
doing
young,
the right
if you're
stuff.
a young winemaker and you have no money, you can go there and you can buy land, you can buy grapes, you can set up a life there, and create your thing. Unfortunately, you're not the only one that thought about it. A lot of other people did it, and so there's a lot of that stuff on the market. But because of that, the Languedoc is a place where you can really find
Red and white wine.
under $20.
Mhm.
Red and white, in particular, they have this grape called Cinsault, which is like
Spell it.
Cinsault.
Oh, Senso.
Yeah, and it's like they call it the Pinot Noir of the South sometimes, and it's the grape that they make like shitty Provence salmon colored rosé out of. But then also, if you make like a nice red wine out of it, it can be like really fresh and light, and it doesn't even need to be. Doesn't matter if it's white or if it's red. You just put a chill on it. Very nice.
All right. Anybody have anything to
Cute,
add?
put ice in it. and
Pretty
it's very
cute.
good.
Are Canadian wines?
I love
from
Canadian
Quebec-
wines.
But are they? I'm not sure they could command big prices, but are they reasonable?
Quebec wines are, yeah, not really. Honestly, we're getting to a $35, $25 to $35 price point. There's a lot of good Canadian wines coming out of British Columbia, the Okanagan Valley, as well as the Niagara Peninsula in southern Ontario. But again, we're looking at, there are some wines under $25 there for sure. But
Can you think of anything else? Anything?
I very much like Zev, you might remind me, what's the side project of Matassa? That
Ooh.
little,
God, I don't even know. Sorry.
right.
Is that Tom Luby?
Yeah, Tom Luby's got, I think, makes wine at another chateau. I forget the name of it.
I'll look it up.
Yeah.
I feel bad. I
I'll
love
add
that.
it. Steph, any?
Well, okay, I don't know the prices, but
But you know what?
uh,
Dig
uh,
deep at Four Horsemen.
Well,
What's the best quality to value bottle?
well,
And not specifically, but it turns out it's a.
I mean, quality value. I think
Muscadet
it's
or
going to be.
Chianti
I think it's going to
Classico.
be a lot of the South wines. But I think I would like to recommend like American wine. We have one of our servers, Horseman. We have one of his wines on the list.
Oh, what?
His name is Sam White, and he makes it with his partner Nicole. It's called Mito Americano, and they make it upstate, and it's hybrid grapes, and it's really amazing. And I don't know, it feels very special to be able to have like someone who works with us
Right.
have their wines on the list and have it actually be really great.
Right.
And I think it would
and it's
fall
called
in
again?
Mito Americano,
MITO?
Mitto
T-
Americano.
Okay.
Here's
Yeah.
one for you there. Maxime Magnon.
Spell Magnon.
Magnon. Maxime Magnon.
Where is
That
that?
domain down in the south. Great whites and reds. Very, very special winery.
So we're all kind of tied into the South, has the best values, which is good. Like to hear that. I'm fine with that.
And underrated, like honestly, like
Yeah.
not enough people talk about it and not enough people present them.
Well, that's my point about the book. When you talk about the region, you talk very succinctly and quickly about, size, the best wines were made there. People are starting to
Mhm.
come in. Here's some examples. And that's where the book, more than succeeds. You get a sense. And then when people hear these suggestions, they go, okay, I get it now. They get the specifics. All right. We wrap up the show with a segment called the Weekly Wine Sip. It would be crazy not to taste a wine either from an importer or that ties into the book. I asked you guys, pick a wine that sort of represents the book. So we could do three things. Let's talk about the wine, who and what. The winemakers in the book, I recognize it. So tell me a little about that. And then, Zeb, tell me a little about the wine. And then we'll do a quick evaluation.
We'll talk about this wine?
Yeah.
So this is a really great wine to highlight the book, I think, in a lot of ways. One, it's an old friend of the Canadians, this lady Katie, who's a Canadian, who had sort of a wild idea to move to France and start making wine, and ended up being the chef de cave at Ganva, which is a great winery in the Jura, for 3 years.
Sure.
And like actually just somehow figured out the thing that people, write novellas about, and like took over vines and owns them now and has a tiny little house and makes nice chicken. And this wine is called Les Oubliés, which means like the forgotten ones. And it's they're hybrid grapes that have been planted in Jura. It's a 120-year-old vineyard. By vineyard, it's 3 rows of vines.
That's it.
that constitute of this particular wine. And so it's sort of like, it's old viticulture, it's Jura, it's Canada, it's crazy dreams, and it's really tasty wine all together.
What's
So
the
that's-
varietal?
It's like 8
it-
or 9 different
blend?
strange varieties. that
I've
they-
asked the question,
they
and
haven't
she
even
skates
been
around it.
eaten.
I don't think many people know. There could be
Cannevat-
Enfariné
Is it a
in there.
field?
There is
There
some
could be
Enfariné
Céval
in there.
Noir.
Field blend.
Yeah,
Is it a field? It is a field.
Yeah,
blend.
yeah.
So whatever's out. It's
It's
not
like whatever's in those
the
3
vines are
rows,
old enough that
kind of.
nobody's
But
alive.
she's not
or-
growing a row of this, a row of
No.
that.
No. This is
Shit's
it's
going
it's
on.
been there for 120 years. These 3
She's posted
rows.
pictures of this vineyard too on occasion, I think early on. And there's great examples of marcotage in that vineyard where the vine basically goes back into the soil and comes
back
back
out.
out
Oh my
another vine
God.
and goes back in. So
Wow.
it's basically one vine,
What's
but
that called?
3 plants. Marcotage.
I never heard of that.
Yeah.
Learn something new every day. All right. Do you remember the recipe in the book?
There's 2 recipes for
From-
Katie's. There's the vin jaune chicken with morel mushrooms,
I
which
love
is
that
just so good. And Dave made it for us at his farm so that we could reshoot some photos. And boy, I was so full that day because he made, 13 recipes in a span of like 4 hours, which was something I'd never seen for a photo shoot done before. And so incredible. And then the salad, which is just so beautiful visually. It's just a green salad with a pea vinaigrette. So the fresh peas are integrated straight into the vinaigrette and kind of poured into the like salad, the lettuce cups. And it's just so beautiful and so fresh to go with how rich the chicken is.
What's fun about that chicken recipe is that the chickens are roasted like roasted chickens and then basically cut apart like you would a roasted chicken, and the sauce is made separately, right? So it's kind of cool. It lightens up the dish a little bit.
Yeah.
You don't have any flabby skin so
It's
much.
not braised in it. Or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. It's not
Yeah.
super fatty. It's basically like
Yeah.
a healthier
You get the
version
best
of
of
poulet au
both, right?
morille. Yeah.
You get the both. All right. So, Zev, let's talk about this. So the color is kind of how do you describe that? It's kind of a medium.
So I would say this about Jura color. Basically, like the whole world loves this like chilled red thing, this like see-through red wine,
Right.
as I like to call it. And I believe that they've all been imitating Jura wine.
Okay.
Poussard is the grape there that's really see-through and light. It's a colder climate place. You don't get full ripeness. This is made from other grapes, but I think that this wine also expresses that vibe of like the really see-through red.
Yeah. It's great color.
And I think that's like, we're blurring identity these
All right.
days.
Let's go to the nose. Everyone, pay attention. The nose. What do we get on the nose? I suck at this.
I suck at
I
this too. I think it's
tasted
all bullshit.
I tasted a. Right. It is kind of bullshit.
I honestly, raspberry, blackberry, brambleberry, whatever, like pencil lead. What are we talking about? Like, none
Right.
of that makes any sense to me.
I-
Those are not the things that
I
the
think
wine.
you can
when
avoid
I-
mouthfeel. It's a medium type.
Sure.
wine.
Yeah. So it's mouthfeel is easier to describe. It's very low tannin. The acidity is really fresh. For me, it's very fruity.
Mhm.
That's like the most
Yes.
descriptive word I'll ever use.
So on the palate, you get good fruit.
I mean, I think we're very similar in that way. Like, I don't really taste wine in that way, in a descriptive kind of way. I don't want to.
Yeah,
I'm
same.
also
It's
like,
either a good
you
or I
can
hate
hear it. I'm
this.
like super congested, and so I can't
Allergies?
smell anything. Oh, I've been like on the tail end of being sick. But yeah, to me that feels a little. I don't want to use that circle jerk kind of vibe to be
Yeah.
like around a table and be like, I
Well,
smell this, I
so
smell
I have,
that.
I have to make a confession. So
Yeah.
I'm by far the oldest guy here. I mean, if I had to bet, David's second, but nowhere near. So
I'm catching up somehow.
I cut my teeth. It was just timing and being sort of inventive on Napa cabs in Bordeaux. You know, that whole Parkerized BS, and became a collector and all of that, and have verticals of Harlan and all that. And
I love all that stuff, by the way.
I do too.
Okay.
Like Philip Togny.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I
sure.
go back to my diamond.
Robert Parker is the best writer in modern wine history.
So I have
your
that,
favorite
but I
wine?
had too much of it, and I had the peripheral stuff, and some nice Bordeaux. Got tired of it, and kind of opened my eyes. Went to Tuscany, which was kind of the same BS with Brunello and all that. But then really, opened up. And then I started doing the show about 8 years ago. One of my first guests was like Isabella Giron and Pascaline and all that. And those are the guys that sort of said, there's something going on here. And my life has gone from where I started to this and what's important. So I can't help myself when I say, what's a good wine and food pairing, or what do you get on the nose? Because you use circle jerk. Those were the jerk-offs that I sat around with, and they would go, what do you get here? Leather and pencil shape. So I still have a little of that in me, but I don't care about it as much
that's
anymore.
true.
We didn't mean to shame you for those
No, not
questions.
at all.
No. I'm just I'm proud to say that I've evolved, I mean, I kind of get it.
But
now.
I think our attitude towards it is why this book is the way it is. That it's not so much about the way the wine tastes or smells, and it's really about the
Didn't
people.
I say you
and,
were attracted
yeah.
to the winemakers in the story, not the
Exactly.
way it smells or how it,
Exactly.
which is important.
But there's
But
still
I do
things
have
that
to
I like
ask
or don't.
one last shameless question, and Zev, you stay out of this. What's a good pairing with a wine like this? Like, what would Will?
Oh, I know. I would not
I tell you,
dare
this
getting
is,
into Will's head.
This would murder on jambon blanc, sliced ham with butter and a bit of mustard. Absolute
with bread or
carnage.
no bread or?
Yeah, no bread.
That
Sounds amazing.
Ham comté, mustard on a piece of baguette with this is just carnage.
As someone who hasn't had breakfast yet, that sounds incredible.
Stephanie, you gotta take better care of yourself. You know that.
Oh, it's just.
All right, we got to wrap up
running
the
around.
show. I'm going to do a quick wrap up, and then I want to ask about you guys and information, where to get the book and all that. So just hang in for a second. So if you have a question, suggestion, wine happening or event, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's sam@thegrapenation.com. Listen to the Grape Nation podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your pods. Please subscribe to the Grape Nation and leave a review if you like the podcast. Follow us on Instagram at @SBenRuby, on X @BenRuby. You can always use the hashtag #TheGrapeNation to find us on both. We're on Facebook at The Grape Nation. As I mentioned, we'll post the gang's wine list picks, and it's ×3, so there's some pretty good recommendations in there. I will list the weekly wine sip wine, the Maynard that we taste. I'll give you a vintage year, the name, and all of that stuff. All right, so collectively, if you didn't listen to this podcast and weren't stimulated to buy this book, you're crazy. Where do I go to get the book? What do you tell people?
It is available on the ZRS website, correct?
All right.
Yeah.
That's one place.
Yeah.
Four Horsemen, in person or online.
Is it not? I hate to go on this. Is it not a bookstore Amazon thing? It should be.
It's
in
on
Rizzoli.
Amazon. It's on the Rizzoli bookstore.
It's published by Rizzoli.
I haven't gone to all of the bookstores, so I'm not sure exactly where it's currently available. But online, wherever books are sold, you
Listen,
will be
yeah.
able to find
You
it.
can buy it on Amazon, but I think you should make a special effort to try to
Small
buy it from your
bookseller.
local retailer.
Yeah.
And it's there.
Yeah.
It should be at small. Buy now or
Or within the next few months, it should be in all small bookstores. But
We
right
always-
now, if you don't want to encourage Amazon or big chains, buy directly
Well,
from
Amazon
Zev
really does
or-
take the large majority of the money in the production of a book.
I know.
Yeah.
So, like, if you could do anything to not buy it from them, anybody else is
Do
fine.
you guys have
Yeah.
any book signings coming up?
tonight, which is not useful for
Let's
this.
just say we're in New York.
We're doing a launch at Night Moves, which is the little
Okay.
nightclub attached to the
at
Four Horsemen.
Horsemen.
And on Thursday, we're doing a lunch at Le Vaudor on the Upper East Side. And then we'll be in Montreal over the weekend at Bar Henrietta
On
What
Saturday.
on Saturday.
is there a place to go to find out if there are these book signings?
We will
occurring?
be posting it on all of our social whenever we make it. do an
Instagram,
event. Yeah.
the
Okay.
Zevro Vine Selections Instagram is constantly posting
So
stuff.
ZRS Severo Vine
We'll be
Selection.
doing
Good
we'll
spot
be
to go.
doing like a lot of book signings and events. We're not like doing like a condensed tour, but I'd say
Right.
over the next year we're gonna do something in Paris in November, and we're gonna do
Zev
something
is condemned to fully travel with this book for the rest of his
for the
life.
rest
Yeah.
of my life.
Yeah, and
unfortunately.
we'll try to do a few more events in New York in the summer too. And yeah, we're stretching it out. It's
So,
a reason for us to
It
hang
makes
out.
sense. You know, based on your patterns, travel, and all that, you'll promote it in Europe if you're there, that type of
Yeah.
stuff. So if we want to get more information on Zevro Vine Selections, and also there's info on the book, we go to where?
God, all we do is put shit on the internet. Just go
Social media or on a
social
website?
media and the website.
Okay, so what's the website?
What's your handle on social media, Zev?
Oh, I don't know. I
So
believe
there-
it's Zevro
I
Vine
know.
Selections.
There's Zevro,
.com.
there's Zevro Vine, which has less followers
Strict
than Zevro Vine Selections. So Instagram at Zevro Vine Selections. Rogan. Stephanie,
Yes,
you're at Stephanie Mercier Voyer.
it's at Steph Mercier Boyer.
Is
on-
it Steph or
Yeah, just write Steph
Okay.
on social.
All right.
Yeah, that's where you can find out what I'm doing, whether it's wine related or if I'm making a new costume for Halloween. Stay
you go.
tuned.
And David, you have two I want to talk about. You have Hayfield Farm.
Yeah, so that's at Hayfield Farm. I have at Hayfield Farm Cottage. There's
Which is what, like agritourism?
yeah, it's an Airbnb
Here you go.
next to with a big view on the vineyard. It's kind of neat, nice little place.
And
and,
then your handle,
At David McMillan MTL on
Montreal.
Instagram. Yeah.
All right. All right. So that's where you can get the book. Support your local bookstore. Go on Zev's site. You'll see it at Four Horsemen. I think it'll pop up at some other places too. It's definitely at Rizzoli. All right. So I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Stephanie Mercier Voyer. I want to thank Zev Rovine. I want to thank David McMillan for spending, if you look at your watch, over an hour and a half talking about this. I want to thank our engineer Armin and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. I'm Sam Ben Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation. The Grape Nation is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network. Food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.